welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. My name is Glenn Turansky. I'm a member of the advisory board of One Business World. The Leading Entrepreneurs of the World series is a digital presentation, informational, and education series with leading entrepreneurs, investors, and advisors. Our goal is to provide the global business and entrepreneurial communities with a window into the mind of those who are shaping the future of our world. Today, we're very pleased to welcome global and renowned entrepreneur, speaker, and author, Shane Green. Shane is the founder and president of SGEi, a Fortune 500 cultural consulting firm. SGEi is a global firm that assists service-focused brands across multiple industries to exceed their customers' expectations by designing and delivering cultural and operational blueprints, mechanisms, and trainings. At SGEi, Shane and his team offer a variety of learning experiences, from employee-focused training to leadership workshops and cultural consulting services, believing and understanding that a company's employees define the overall customer experience and a company's ability to deliver on its brand promise and purpose. Shane, it's a pleasure and honor to have you here with us today. We're looking forward to hearing more about the 3 M's of the employee experience strategy, and welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. So let me turn it over to Shane, and I will join you on the other side.
Glenn, thanks so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Very excited to be here. And again, excited to talk particularly to this group, again, with that entrepreneurial mindset, business mindset of really understanding this thing called culture, and particularly employee experience strategy. Now, again, as an entrepreneur and having been through the business cycle on a few companies, the question that always comes up, well, when we start to talk about culture, is that really an HR thing? And you'll hear me talk probably a couple of times, and I want to sort of put it out there. Culture is no longer an HR thing. It is a business thing. In fact, as I'll argue today, maybe one of the most important business things that you think about, particularly as an entrepreneur in startup environments. The culture that is established really will dictate and have a big influence about how you operate and how you're perceived out there in the real world today. I think when it comes to the idea of performance, and again, we're obviously still driven by the results that we deliver each and every day, the what. The reality today is that in a social media driven world, with so much awareness out there about how companies operate, the how has to become a critical part of your thinking, and the how is driven and is culture. And so what you deliver, the results, whether it's to Wall Street, whether it's to your owners, investors, whether it's back into your communities, the reality is that what you do must be coupled with how you do it to really drive what I think success is about today. So I want to talk to you today about what I call the 3 M's of EX strategy. EX, employee experience. Employee experience is what drives culture. If you read the numbers that were coming out this year, EX, the employee experience marketplace, worth probably about $300 billion going to be spent, which is a massive amount of money, incredible, covering things from training, recruitment, coaching, leadership development, wellness, health. All of those things get coupled in. And I've been very fortunate. I get to work with a lot of different organizations, talk to them about that spend and about what it is that they're doing to create a great employee experience. And the shocking thing to me is that while there is a lot of spend happening, there is not a lot of strategy behind it. And so for me, I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years really understanding the strategy of how to deliver a great employee experience that will lead to the type of culture that you're looking for. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to talk to you about how to create the type of culture that elevates performance, customer care, company success, all of those things. Because again, culture is a business thing. So as we kind of jump into this, I want to take you back a little bit. I came out of the hospitality business. I was very fortunate. I worked with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company for a number of years. And it was where I sort of founded this understanding of culture, even though at the time I didn't realize it. I put up on the screen there a hospitality axiom, something at the Ritz-Carlton that we talked about each and every day. And it sounds and seems so simple, that a person with a great attitude will always give you great service. A person with a poor attitude will always deliver poor service. Again, I think as you can all relate out there, you know what good service and poor service is. And the thing that we were always talking about was how was the attitude of our employees? Because the reality is when it came, in this case, to customer service, but in any element of performance in your organization, you have to understand that the employee's attitude will dictate that performance. They'll dictate how well they want to take care of your customers, how accurate they are, how much effort they put in. All of those things come to play. And so over the years, what I learned was to always think about this idea of employees' attitude as being the key driver of not only individual, team, but also company performance. And it was this kind of thinking that has stuck with me over the years that has really come in sort of the forefront of my work around workplace culture. Workplace culture, and I want to make sure that you understand, culture is just an outcome. It is the collective attitudes, feelings, and thinkings of a team of employees, or any team, in fact. Again, culture is in your family, it can be in your business and company, it's in your sports team, your community, your church, any of those places where a group of people comes together, their collective attitudes and feelings is the culture. And in workplace, it's about how they feel about the company they work for, the jobs, the roles that they do, and whom they do it for. So how they feel day in and day out creates this collective attitude. This mindset, this feeling, this attitude is your culture. And I want you to understand this. The question is not, do you have a culture? Every group of people, every workplace has a culture. The question that I always ask is, it the type of culture that you want? And this is where I start to kind of lay in the idea that to get the type of culture that you want, you need to have a strategy to get there. So hopefully it makes sense, but why is culture so important? Because how people feel manifests itself in behavior, effort, level of care, performance, as I've already said. But what we see is in a social media driven world that these factors are actually defining your reputation with your customers. And the reputation that they have, particularly online, is your brand, whether you like it or not. Tony Hsieh, I thought, said it best, again, that brand is just a lagging indicator of culture. What happens internally behind the scenes today is manifesting itself in front of the customer, and the customer and how they see it, how they use it, how they perceive it. That's your reputation. Your reputation is your brand. So for me, it's really important to really understand that we put so much effort into brand strategy. And again, as an organization, we have strategy sessions for days talking about the brand, the business. But when was the last time you had a culture strategy session? And I would argue that that culture strategy session is probably more important than anything else today, because it's driving and defining your business and brand. So company culture, and again, I touched on this in the beginning, but I want to reiterate, your company culture is the outcome of your employees' experiences at work. How your employees feel during these critical moments when interacting with a direct manager, and all the mechanisms that you have in place in the workplace defines their work experience. So this idea of EX is so important. And I've done a lot of focus, work, research, and expertise and experience in the workplace, really understanding how EX drives CX. EX really does drive customer experience, which I know for many of you will be a major factor in your thinking. But I want you to kind of get into the mind that this idea of having an EX strategy is actually a critical part of your business, and it's something that everybody can do. Now, I want to kind of put out there, before we go into EX, I did a lot of work in the CX space, did a lot of work with the MBA, BMW, a lot of really big organizations, and understanding how to elevate the customer's experience. A lot of that work actually led to what we're doing today, which is talking about employee experience. We often talk in the CX space about product, place, process, people. And what I realized was the people element of the customer experience strategy was often the last thing that was talked about and thought about. And so for me, getting involved in people strategy, or EX strategy, was just fundamentally critical to help drive customer experience success. But as I started to see so many other elements of performance in the workplace. So as I sort of said, EX strategy, the outcome is culture. And your EX strategy is defined by what I call the 3 M's: moments, mechanisms, and managers. And I want to sort of take you through these 3 mechanisms to help you start to develop your own idea about how to build the right culture, how to have a customer employee experience that will give you the right type of culture. And I want to come back to this idea, Mahatma Gandhi quote that I've put there up on the screen is very important. Culture resides in hearts and minds of people. And that's very important. As business people, we must understand that when it comes to culture, we are talking about hearts and minds. We're talking about an emotional side of the business. And this is often a bit of a challenge for some people, particularly I've found in the entrepreneurial and startup space, where we're so focused on our product, we're so focused on testing it, getting it to market, and all of those things, that we often forget about the emotive elements, particularly internally, that are, again, a big part of your success. So I want to kind of break this down and take you through the 3 M's, talk about that, know that this is about delivering the type of culture that you are looking for. And as I sort of said, just remember, when dealing with people, you're not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures of emotion. That's on the branding side. That's from a marketing sort of perspective. But I think it's important because it also talks about how we have to think about our employees. Again, our employees are not creatures of logic. They're creatures of emotion. And so this idea of emotional intent is a critical part of employee strategy. If you're going to do something, now I work with organizations all around the world, and everyone has a recruiting strategy. They hire people, they have an onboarding of how to get people up and running, they have a recognition program, probably have some career development, they have some training, they have some communication elements. All of these things, which we talked about earlier, this $300 billion employee experience marketplace is great. But what I don't see is a lot of emotional intention, which means they do the recruitment and the interview process, but that has no emotional attachment, doesn't get people really connected to the brand. They might have an orientation first, they are an onboarding first week where they get people trained, but they don't focus on emotionally connecting them to the organization. They have a recognition strategy. They put millions into recognition in large organizations, but really, is it personable and meaningful so that it has a really good emotional outcome? It's usually next up, who's kind of next to be recognized. And so what I see is that while a lot of the things that you'll see me talk about may be happening in your business and organization, the reality is emotional intent is not behind it, which means the emotional outcome of lifting how people feel is not there. And that's a critical part of what culture has to be about. Culture, the collective hearts and minds. Our goal as organizations, as managers, is to lift them emotionally to perform better. Okay, and whether you follow sports, whether you follow performance-based anything, business success, I can tell you that when people feel better about what they do, they're going to perform better each and every day. That is your goal. Now, this doesn't preclude that some people just have bad days. Everyone is off. Everyone's kind of be down. And that's why when I went back and I looked at that definition, I said collectively. Collectively means that for the most part, most people are feeling good about what they do and who they do it for. Not everybody will be perfect. People have things going on at home. People happen to them. People just have off days. What I want you to be really clear about, and this is, I kind of run into this a lot, is that in organizations, maybe smaller organizations, startups and that, when someone's having a bad day, there's an overreaction to say that the culture is broken. That's the power that, one person on a small team could have. But if the rest of the people on the team, the other 5 people, the other 10 people are feeling pretty good, don't overreact. Everybody's allowed to have a bad day. That doesn't mean you completely ignore them. But what I don't want to have is an overreaction to suddenly having to reimagine and refresh everything. So culture is collectively, for the most part, for the most people, they feel pretty good about what they do. And as I sort of said, remember, you're getting into this idea that we're dealing with creatures of emotion. So you have to take that into account if you're serious about creating culture and having a great EX strategy. So I've got kind of 5 steps that I sort of, take a lot of organizations and companies through that I'm going to review with you today. Some at a fairly high level, but really understand these are the same 5 steps that's critical to so many other elements that you have in the branding, marketing, financial strategies. Start with the end in mind, create a vision. Seems pretty easy, but creating a vision for the type of culture you want is important. Remember, begin with the end in mind. The outcome is culture. So what type of culture do you want? Identify the key moments. So the first M that we talk about is moments. And these are the key moments on the employee's journey. And it might be on a day, a year, etc. And at the end of the day, what I want you to understand is we've identified, I think, about 37 key moments that are absolutely critical to how someone feels at work. And as you're going to hear me kind of talk about, this moment strategy is probably one of the most important things that you'll hopefully walk away from today. Because what we try to get an organization to understand is you don't have to be on for your employees all the time. But in key moments, you have to have some emotional intent. Then we look at mechanisms. I kind of touched on that. All organizations see after something around recruitment, onboarding, communication, recognition, accountability, career development, training. All of these things come into play. Those are mechanisms. But what I want to sort of stress, as I stressed before, is that many of the mechanisms that we go in and audit and look at just don't have any emotional connection to them. They're kind of bland, they're boring, they're not on brand. And as a result, that effort is not getting the output that you want. It's not getting the emotional uptake that you want. The fourth step is look at your leadership habits. So the third M was managers. They play such a huge impact. And a lot of what I talk about with organizations is what is your leadership habits or expectations to support the type of culture? You have to define these, because knowing what to expect from your managers is an absolute key part of the process. And then the final part is a very simple: implement, execute as we go along. So I want to sort of take you through these, each of these steps, and again, kind of answer some of the common questions that we kind of get and have you sort of think about. Let's start with vision. Lewis Carroll, again, Adventures in Wonderland. If you don't, I think the Cheshire Cat said it better. If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which path you take. That's such a key part. I think I use it in business, and I've used that in business in all aspects of the organization. But the same is for culture. As I said, if culture is the outcome, let's kind of think about where we want to go, so we're knowing what path we should take. Over the years, we've worked with a lot of organizations and come up with a lot of different visions for culture. And I put some of them up on the screen here. And again, they can be just simple, powerful statements. Our vision is that we want our employees to feel like they're first, an environment that respects, recognizes, and develops, a place where people excel, a culture that thrives, a team of friends, building a place of belonging. Whatever it is, I just really want to understand that by beginning with an idea gives us some directional path that we want to take. And it's great to be able to come out to this. Now, when it comes to culture, I don't go out and sort of say, hey, this is something that you're going to put up on your website, you're going to make a big deal. Obviously, organizations have visions about their business and brand, and they don't often put out what is our vision for our culture. And yet, successful large organizations in the recruitment process are very loud, very proud about the type of culture that they want to be. So I urge you to think about this, create this, put it down on paper, and have it as a North Star, particularly through this process of asking yourself, well, what's the type of culture that our people that we're going for? It keeps you focused, and it's great particularly as owners, executives out there, that you kind of have something that always you can come back to, because let's face it, you are going to be busy. You're going to focus on brand, business, financials. You're going to have a lot of, diverging kind of requirements of your time. So it's good to have a bit of a North Star that you come back to and say, okay, let's just come back and go, remember, we said we wanted to have this type of culture. And vision for me is, the ultimate sort of, sign of success. And what do you want to be when you grow up? For me, it's like, what do you want your employees to say about working there? If I went onto Glassdoor, what would you want your employees to say? I think, if employees went onto Glassdoor and says, hey, this is a company where they put employees first. Hey, this is a company that was really committed to a place of belonging. Working there is like being with a team of friends. Hey, it's a workplace where I want to be. You are going to have a great employee reputation. And again, just like you do with your brand and your online reputation with your customers, you're starting, and you're going to have to understand that having a reputation online for the type of place it is to work is making a difference. And it is a big part of ensuring that you get the type of quality and the talent that you're looking for to drive your business success. So again, begin with the end in mind. Let's talk moments. I really want to focus on this. This has been, in 20 years, I've been working in CX and EX. If you haven't read Daniel Kahneman's work, please take some time out to do it. If you're in the customer experience space, if you're dealing with customers, you must understand his work. Pecan theory is absolutely one of those sort of groundbreaking pieces and must-read pieces. There's a great Harvard Business Review article, very simple to read. But please read some of his work and understand how he has impacted the idea of around experience, and particularly how people remember. His work basically comes down to the idea that if you're serious about experience is all about memories. And what happens is memories are created through snapshots, not videos. And I've put this as kind of like this is my North Star in a lot of the work that I do, because in every organization, whether it's working for customer experience or employee experience, what I want you to remember is that every touch point doesn't have the same level of importance to the customer or the employee. What we've learned is that there are certain moments or snapshots that matter the most. As I sort of said, I've done a lot of customer experience work. And one of the best examples way back when I was more in the hospitality space was Gallup, probably about 15 years ago, did some work to understand that there was about 1,357 touch points in a 24-hour stay at a hotel. And yet only 5 of those touch points actually mattered in determining whether or not the guest had a great stay. This happens in all aspects of business. We focused on this when we worked with the NBA on developing a season ticket holder program, with BMW about how to sell a car correctly and to service a car. All of this was about understanding what are the key moments in your customer's experience. Well, we've done the same for the employee experience. The employee experience, like customer experience, is the journey that your employees go on. And that's very important. Every employee that works for you has a journey. What are the key moments that help determine whether or not they feel good about what they do and who they do it for? And I will tell you that these moments, that they can last over employees' journey. They happen actually even before they start working for you. We've actually discussed this about 7 moments in the recruitment process alone that has an impact on the emotional connection someone has with your organization. From as simple as, was I welcome and made feel and felt good in the interview process? Did I get to meet people that I would connect with and have a relationship with, whether it's managers or employees? All of these moments matter. And remember, when we're talking about culture and this emotional connection, that's why I think it's so important to understand that these key moments are absolutely relevant and what most organizations need to focus in on. I want to give some sort of here, because the easiest ones we've looked at, and we do a lot of surveys with employees and look at a lot of information. And we've, over about the last 5 or 6 years, identified what we call our 9 key moments in an employee's day. This is really important because while we're saying it's 9 key moments, they total about anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes in an employee's 8-hour day. Now, this is important because a lot of managers go, oh my goodness, 9 moments in a day. How am I going to manage that with all my employees? I get it. But every employee has these 9 moments or questions that you can sort of take care of. Let's look at the first one. Do I feel welcome when I arrive at work? Well, that's a very simple one. Again, employees, it does matter. Well, as a manager, make sure you schedule where your employees come through or depart early in their day where you get to welcome everybody. And it doesn't need to be one-on-one. It could be as a group. Morning meetings are fantastic for that. Or at the start of the shift meetings are great, where you can basically say, hey, welcome. Thanks everybody for coming in. It's a simple idea, but has a huge impact when the employee looks back and decides whether or not they had a great day. The second question they ask, do I have the tools, information, staffing, and support to do my job well or to do my job really at a high level today? Again, I go back to these sort of start of shift meetings that are so impactful, where a manager can say, hey, we've got the tools, we've got the information, here's the staffing I've put in place, here's how I'm supporting you today. The reality is there's going to be some busy and bad days at work. Things go wrong, things happen, get turned upside down. Did the manager think about that, and did they adjust, and are they letting me know? Does my manager listen to me when I share a concern, idea, or comment? Again, this may not happen every day, but what we've seen a lot of is how does a manager respond when the employee says, hey, do you have a moment to talk, or I've got something I want to share with you? One of the biggest mistakes we see a lot of managers doing is that they say that they're listening, but they're in their technology, they're on their phones and their computers. And the question comes back, well, did they really listen to me? We're seeing that in a lot of the feedback that employees become very frustrated that while a manager might say they're listening, they're really not. Managers are great at telling everybody that they can, multitask. But multitask is a myth. Your brain might be able to move back and forth between 2 things, 3 things, or 4 things, but it can only focus on one thing at once. So these moments, I think, are kind of critical. Did my manager recognize me today? And that requires, did the manager get out of the office? Did they get out from behind their desk? Did they come over? And did they see me do something well? Here's a little secret. An employee is going to do many things well in their day. For the most part, they do monitoring things. You only have to catch them do something once, but you need to be very specific about saying, hey, I saw that. That was really well done. Great job. So again, it seems kind of simple, but these are important things that make up someone's day. A big one, did my manager get in and help when we got busy? Maybe not every day is busy, but when it is, does my manager get in and help, or do they still hide in their office, sit behind their desk, etc.? These are the things that employees think about. Do I feel my efforts made a difference today? One of the best practices we saw in a lot of managers was at the end of the day, and this is different from recognition, we're very specific, where at the end of the day, they might say to the team something like, hey, you know what, we wouldn't have got through without it, or I'm so glad you guys were with me today, or I'm so glad you were part of the team today. Again, letting them know that they had made a difference. My point is that all of these moments, and they happen extremely quickly, extremely reactively, make a difference in how the employee feels. Now, what I would tell you is that if an employee has one bad day, doesn't usually change the whole culture. But what about every day? Every day they come home, didn't feel welcome. They weren't set up for success. They didn't get their breaks. They didn't get recognition. They don't feel they made a difference. What happens is one employee, it starts to build up over a period of time. Then from one employee becomes 2 employees, 3 employees. All of a sudden, because we fail as managers, and to some degree, some of the mechanisms, but a lot of this on the managers, to have emotional impact, 12 to 15 minutes a day with our employees, that over a period of time, the culture can start to turn off. It can start to go bad. So a lot of our work and our advice is understand the key moments in the employee's journey. There's information out there. A couple of other companies, have done some of the work. We've done a lot of the work. But really, quite honestly, if you sit down and go, what matters mostly to our employees? Oh, performance review, birthdays and anniversaries throughout the year. There's actually some really simple, when you think about it, some key moments that emotionally make a huge difference with our employees. And so by sitting back and taking stock of that, and then asking yourself, well, wait up, do we do anything in those moments? Anniversaries and birthdays. Let's just use the birthday one. Comes every year. You usually know exactly when the birthday is. Did you recognize it? It's amazing what employees will say. Just the simple recognition of the manager coming up and saying happy birthday, that has an emotional impact. Go even further. Now, oh, I got a card from my team today, or the executive or ownership group sent a card to my home. That's emotional impact. That means they had intention to make an emotional difference with their employees. And what did it take? Take a few seconds to sign a card, or leave a voicemail message, or drop by and say happy birthday to somebody. That's why I think it's so important that when you think about employee experience, it's not every moment or every touch point every day. What it is, it's about 9 touch points every day and about 37 touch points throughout the year that has an impact in how they feel. And I say this because I don't want this to feel overwhelming for managers or for owners, HR teams that are out there. But it's been very strategic, and it's about having emotional intent. So again, sit down. And by the way, if you're sitting there and going, well, I'm not sure about all the moments, go and ask your employees, because that's what we do. We ask them at the start of every project. We start and asking them, hey, what are the key moments in your day, in your week, in your year that makes you feel good or not so good? And so what we've done is we've built up sort of this sort of study, as it were, about key moments. And we continue to talk about it, but go and ask your employees. And this is really important because obviously, when we talk about culture, a lot of companies come to us and say, hey, we want to talk about culture transformation. We're going to transform our culture. And I go, well, that's huge. And what I would say is, rather than going in, and I've seen this sort of happen before. A few years ago, we were with a large company, sports entertainment company, that had decided that they were going to have a culture change. And so every year they'd bring all the employees together to celebrate sort of the end of the year. And to start the celebration off, the president got up and sort of in a stern voice told everybody, our culture is broken, we're going to fix it, everybody's going to change. So rather than a celebration, everybody was frozen. And it was like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? What's going to happen? Am I going to lose my job? And what happened was that it really had a negative effect on our ability to transform. And that's why you see my book is called Culture Hacker, which is about going behind the scenes, quietly highlighting, identifying some of the moments that could improve. And rather than making a big deal about it, start to have emotional intent. And that's around some of the mechanisms. You might decide that the first day needs to be more emotional. Our recruitment could improve. Our recognition program could be more meaningful. Or, hey, you know what? As a management team, we're going to try and make sure that we hit these 9 moments. So again, once you've got the moments sort of worked out, then again, I've started to lead into this, apply this to the mechanisms. This is why it's important is that often in larger organizations, this is run by human resources. I've already indicated culture is not just an HR thing, it's a business thing. But even in small organizations where there is no human resource or HR function, it's important to define which of these moments you're going to focus on and build sort of some of the mechanisms with emotional intent around it. And as I sort of said, this is an organizational responsibility that if you don't do it, you're leaving yourself up to luck. You're leaving it to, as I say here, mediocrity. And the reality is it doesn't need to be that way. So it's about identifying the key mechanisms. And in my book, Culture Hacker, that's literally what I would do, is that I went through and I was just spending a lot of time. And again, I should say, I'm not an HR person. I have an operation and a business background. But what I was recognizing, there was a number of mechanisms that were employed by organizations. Again, I'm going to put that number back, 300 billion is our EX. That's how much companies around the world are going to spend on these mechanisms this year. And again, what I would see is a lot of these mechanisms were just, they were just there for face value, purpose and values. Many organizations, it was just something they put up on the website, or they had some nice posters in the break room, but it actually didn't mean anything. The selection process I already touched on, it wasn't a real thing. It was just that, they would go through, advertise, interview. There was no real emotional connection. So, how can you improve that recruitment process to be a more emotionally impactful? Orientation, onboarding. Orientation is the first day or first 1 or 2 days that an employee has at work. I worked with a gentleman, Horst Schulze, who's famous in the hospitality business, was the CEO, president of Ritz-Carlton there for a number of years and sort of the founder. He would often tell you only get one chance to make a first impression with an employee, and that the employee's first day is the single most important day in their career with you or in their journey with you, because it allowed you to establish the priorities of what was most important and establish emotional connection. Now, again, I audit and look at orientations at companies around the world. I can tell you that many first days, an employee's first day, what do they hear? Well, they're given all the rules. They literally come in and sit down and someone will go through the handbook and give them all the rules. So guess what? The employee thinks the number one priority of this company is follow the rules. So again, if you want them to go outside of the box, you're in trouble. They'll come in on their first day and fill out a bunch of paperwork. They're filling out all this paperwork. What is the priority of this company? Fill out your paperwork. But what it is there's no emotional connection. Unfortunately, even some organizations, the employee turns up on their first day and they're thrown to work. Immediately, they're working. What is the message from the company? Get stuff done. What doesn't happen, though, is there's no emotional connection. A staggering number is that half of all people that will leave a job this year will do so in the first 90 days. I want to think about that in the first 90 days. Why? Because during the recruitment or what I call the orientation onboarding process, the company did not connect with the person emotionally. I think it's important to understand that half of all employees that are hired are still looking for jobs after they're hired. Why? Because they see it as just another job. It's not their perfect fit, but they may need a job, they may need some work. I find that staggering, and a lot of it happens is because there's no emotional intent from the organization during the recruitment and the orientation and onboarding process. So I think it's something that we want to think about. All these employee engagement. I know that's something that a lot of organizations will say that they focused on. What I think is interesting is that a lot of actual companies don't actually understand what engagement is. The engagement by definition is the interest and involvement in your employees to make the company better or to reach its goals. Are your employees interested and involved in making your company better? Well, that's a pretty big task. Now, a lot of companies will go, well, of course that our employees are interested and involved. Yet, they do not share objectives or goals. They don't keep them updated with the scores or how the company is doing. They don't ask for their ideas to improve. All of these things, which are critical moments for an employee, for them to be interested and involved in making your company better. So all of these mechanisms over the years, we've spent a lot of time in going in and looking at, is there emotional intent? And that's, for me, if you're sitting out there going, well, where do I start? I always say, well, think about which of these moments and which of these mechanisms you could improve. Recognition might be it. We work with a huge organization, had rolled out this massive recognition process and program. Bought a new platform in. You could go in, you could managers could assign you sort of dollars or rewards, and you could earn enough dollars, and eventually you could go and buy yourself something. Again, we've seen it in many sort of organizations, and it's great. It's a really smart way of looking at recognition. However, the failure of this sort of situation, or what happened here, was that the managers were told that this platform was recognition. And all they had to do in terms of recognition was just to use up all their dollars every month. And the company says, hey, managers, by the end of each month, you need to have recognized at least 4 people. Well, when we went in, what we found out was that in the last 2 days of every month, half the managers were going through and just assigning dollars out, just so that they would fulfill their responsibilities to the company. What we found out from the employee's perspective is that while they were getting these dollars, they needed a lot of dollars to get anything meaningful. And what they started to recognize was, well, the managers gave me dollars, but they couldn't get up, walk over to my desk and just say thank you, which was actually more meaningful to them. So all of these mechanisms, look at them for emotional intent and ask yourself, do my employees feel good as a result of this effort and investment I'm putting into these various mechanisms? The fourth part of it I want to get into, I got to talk about managers, and it's so important. If I go back, our 3 M's, the moments, we know the key moments in the employee's journey. We've looked at our mechanisms, the mechanisms that drive how employees feel, but managers, at the end of the day, it's all about you. Again, Primal Leadership, again, one of those books that I hope most managers have taken the time to read, and certainly been a part of their emotional intelligence training and development. But again, I still go back to this, this is sort of sat on my wall now for many years. 70% of employees perceive the climate or culture of their organization to be traced to the actions of their immediate manager. So at the end of the day, when we're talking culture, while those mechanisms have a lot of input, the most important mechanism is the manager. And so I want to sort of spend a little bit of time just talking about what you can do as managers, or how to think about maybe some of the managers in your organization. So let me just start by saying management and leadership. I think we have to do a bit of a differentiation here, because for me, they are 2 sides of the same coin. Management is about compliance, safety, consistency, accuracy, efficiency in the operation. And that's just pulling together 3 or 4 common definitions out of common dictionaries that says this is what management does. And again, if I look at that, compliance, safety, consistency, accuracy, efficiency, all extremely important. So I want to make the point that I'm not saying management is not important. In fact, it's absolutely critical to your business. But I would also say that there's another thing called leadership. Leadership is the manager's ability to inspire their employees' hearts and minds to want to do what you want them to do something they may not want to do, or to perform at their best. The key for this definition is want. When I was first sort of coming into management quite a while ago, I admit it, the leadership definition was my ability to influence my employees to do what I wanted them to do. Now, unfortunately, in that part, it missed out the want. Hospitality, where we've done a lot, but in any business, I want managers to understand you can't make someone feel. You can't make someone want to do their best. They have to want it for themselves. And that is why I think this definition is so important, that what leaders do is they inspire people to want. They want to be their best. They want to deliver their best today. They want to outperform. They want to take care of customers better than anybody else. So for me, leadership is about inspiration. Now, management versus leadership. Management, probably more of that left brain thinking, very logical. Again, absolutely critical. Going over to my leadership, probably more creative. Again, that sort of idea that it's sort of right brain driven. Again, more emotive. And so at the end of the day, people always ask me, well, what's more important? And I go, they're both important. They've got to go hand in hand. They have to be linked. As a manager sitting out there today, you have to be able to deliver both sides. However, what I would say is that in many organizations, the emphasis is on management. It is on run your operation efficiently, be accurate, make sure that everyone is safe. And I get it. But what I say is that it tends to swing too far in that direction. and it tends to be too focused on what's being delivered. It's all about the results. As I sort of said, you've got to have some balance. We've got to balance the management with some leadership. And so this balance is really critical in terms of successful organization. We got to have both. Now, when it comes to culture, it's leadership. Because again, look at my definition of leadership. Leadership is about inspiring hearts and minds. Culture is about the collective hearts and minds. Leaders have the biggest impact on culture because they're focused on inspiring people to want. When it comes to the business, running the business each and every day, management probably has a bigger swing on that. Safety, efficiency, accuracy, consistency, all of that good stuff. But I want to understand that when it comes to culture, to have a good culture, we've got to have some leadership in there. And I will tell, I've said this for years, just because you have a management title doesn't make you a leader. You earn the leadership title by how you are as a manager. And so having that balance and having some focus on your people as much as you do on the functional aspects of your business is absolutely critical. So we've been talking a lot over the years, and I've spent a lot of time in going, well, how do leaders inspire? What do they do? You all have your favorite leadership books. You go back through history, watch movies, all of those things. Well, we've been asking employees for 6-7 years now, well, what does your manager do to inspire you? And we keep coming back to this 5 main things that has been very evident over the years that is about inspiration. Leaders inspire others by setting the example, what we call being the example. Be the example of how work gets done. They are inspiring by sharing their experience and expertise. They inspire by demonstrating effort, turning up when they need to turn up. They inspire by being passionate, having a strong love of what they do. And they are extremely they're inspirational because they care for their team. This is important because, again, when you start to think about, well, what do leaders do? And you start to look at leaders in your organization, as I sort of said, you need a bit of management, a bit of leadership. But if every manager would think about these 5 things that I want to take you through, you can have a big impact on your team. So let me kind of just break this down a little bit, because we often ask, because we've been collecting data, well, what's more important? Well, they're all important. But caring, 28% of survey respondents across all industries around the world said that when a manager cares for them, it's the most important thing in inspiring them. Followed closely by sharing expertise and experience. Their manager was teaching them things and coaching them closely. Being there, putting in effort, being there alongside them, very important, being passionate, and then setting the example. So all of these things matter, but it's really interesting that over the years, as we continue to evolve, how much caring matters. But let's touch on a couple of these. Inspiration comes from setting the example. Remember, I talked about performance at the start of this. Performance is what you deliver against how you deliver it. Traditionally, the managers would be focused on what? It's all about results. And traditionally, our organizations, and in some cases still do, are driven by what have you delivered lately. Wall Street is responsible for being very, very clear that it's about that share price and what's being delivered in the bottom line. The reality is that how we deliver that is also having a big impact on the what, but it's all having more of an impact because in a social media driven world, how we act and interact with other people and how we interact with each other and our communities are really driving not only for younger generations of workers, but for everyone out there today. It's become a priority. So for me, the first thing I think a leader does very well is they set the example for how work gets done, often emulating and being an example for the company values. But if you look at them, their words, actions, the decisions they make, they really are sort of that guiding light. When you have someone that you can look up to, is often sort of talked about, it's really important. It's a big part of the inspiration that's there. Sharing experience and expertise. We found this was a big one. When an employee felt that they had a manager who would sit down and committed to their development, it was really important and big. They really were quite inspired by that. That when they knew that a manager wanted them to be better, it made a huge difference in how that manager felt about the manager and how they wanted to perform more for them. So keep that in mind, managers. Again, how often in your work week, in your day, in the month, do you actually get out there and actually share your experience and expertise? And it might be in a more of a formal training setting or just getting alongside, working alongside, but ask yourself whether or not you're actually spending that time to teach others, because it has a huge impact on your individual performance and culture. It comes from effort. Again, employees would talk a lot of comments. You know, our manager doesn't hide behind a desk. They don't sit in their office all day. It's so important. I feel that when we get into management, we spend too much time in our offices and behind our desks because we're so focused on reports and audits and all of these things. It's important that employees see that. What they talk about is the managers that get out of their office and work alongside them. But specifically when they're in the operation, when things get busy, lending a hand, supporting them, giving them high five, that really stands out. Again, a great source of inspiration. So again, think about as you run your business, when it's busy, when things go wrong, are you there alongside your team? Because it has a huge impact on how they see you as a leader. Energy, enthusiasm. You got to love what you do. And again, I think you've heard this sort of over and over, but when someone really loves things, it's an inspiration for others. They get excited for it, and it's contagious. I often look and talk to managers about this. I mean, do you still love what you do? Do you love it? You know, people can lose their love. People can fall out of love. People can, over time, not feel the same excitement. I think it's always important for managers to keep in mind that they have to stay connected with that passion, whether it's the work that they do, it's the opportunity to work with people, it's the industry, it's the environment. But please know that that passion, that fire that burns within, is a really important part of inspiration. And then the final one we talked about, which is care. You know, just remember that employees don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we've, as I sort of said in those numbers earlier, the fact is that people really do respond. When they say that their manager cares, it's probably the most important thing in terms of inspiring them to want to do more, to really do more for the manager. And so we've spent a lot of time going, well, what does that actually mean? And sort of spend a lot of time in focus groups. And just some quick hits here when it comes to caring: be available, be approachable. You know, it sounds very simple, but you know, the old adage, I think, the open door policy, you can come to me with anything at any time. I think the challenge is always being any time, because, you know, when is a good time? Sometimes it's not. Just make sure that you are available, that you set up time, that you're approachable. People can bring you some bad news and you don't get really sort of upset at it. Communication is a big part of this. You know, listen with curiosity. I've talked a lot over the last years for managers. I think this current pandemic's kind of turned things on its head a little for us. And I said to all managers, I said, if there's ever a time for you to say, I don't know it all, it's now. You know, sometimes as managers, we feel compelled that we do have to know it all. And this time when we don't and things are turned upside, we've got to be curious. Curiosity, the opposite is grandiosity. I know it all. When you listen with curiosity, you're interested in what people have to say. You're interested in other people's points of view. I find when it comes to communication, listening is probably one of the most important things that we do as managers. You know, speak with honesty, be open. If you don't know it all, say that you'll work it out. Don't be afraid to kind of hide that. And again, acting with integrity, we touched on how your behaviors. Always remember that boss watching is the most watched sport in the world. The employees are always watching the boss. So remember, your actions will speak louder than words. Make sure you're recognizing effort and talent. It goes into just not rewarding the people that deliver you the results that you want, people that are improving, people that you know, that put in a lot of effort. I always think that that's important as a manager. Recognizing people will get you the best out of them. So we talked about the key moments in an employee's day, getting out and just walking around and seeing somebody do something well, I think is really critical. That actually ties into respect really well. Respect comes from that old Latin word respectus, which is to look back on at someone. And I think that's a really important, that for me, respect, and it ties with recognition, is about, do you see people? Do you recognize them? Do you see what they do well? Do you recognize and know their strengths? And so, you know, as you're thinking about that idea of respect, getting out and pointing out to someone and seeing what their talents and strengths are, I think is really cool and important. Just remember, taking interest in others. Employees talk a lot about their managers that would take time out and just get to know them beyond work. I think it's such an important, simple approach to your management style, but it really does, you know, show up in how you care about others. And then as a sort of, you know, at the end of the day, kind of tie in leadership. And remember, if you're inspiring others to dream more, learn more, do more, become more, that's leadership. And I'll let you know that there are many leaders in our world that don't have management titles, but just because of their actions, because of their words, because of who they are and what they do, they inspire others to be better than they are today. And sort of for me, that's what leadership really comes to and is all about. So that's kind of my 3 M's. I've covered a lot of ground. I've covered a lot of space. It is a big topic, but hopefully I've kind of pulled it together in such a way with our 3 M's that this is a really smart, easy to follow, easy to understand strategy to get to where obviously you want to be. I would say that the final part of this is, remember, you got to implement. We often get all our strategies, we do all this work on creating plans and strategies and never do anything with it. And I sort of finish that with one of my sort of all-time favorite quotes: when all is said and done, often more is said than done. Just remember, we can have all the great plans in the world, but if we actually don't do something with it, then what was the point? And that's really part of what I wanted to come and talk to you about today. As I said, I really appreciate you sort of taking time out, but more importantly, what are you going to do differently? Whether it's starting to think a little bit about the key moments in your employee's day, whether it's focusing some of the mechanisms, whether it's starting to think about what my leadership style and how my managers do lead our teams. For me, that's the most important thing. And hopefully you've walked away with a few sort of nuggets, useful pieces, but most importantly, hopefully you walked away with some things that you could get done. And if you're interested, as I sort of said, I've written a Culture Hacker I've talked about. There's some easy books and some different things that we've put out there to the world. But it's all about, hey, this is how you get things done. Because as a business person, as an entrepreneur, I've listened to all the philosophies. I've listened to everything that's out there. Like you, I want to get things done. So hopefully this was a great way to give you some insights on that. And hopefully this will be something that inspires more things to get done. Glenn, what do you think?
Wow, this was phenomenal. Thank you, Shane. I took about 5 pages worth of notes, just going through. Fantastic presentation. I was actually on a panel a bunch of years ago in Washington with Alan Murray. So he's always was a favorite of mine as a columnist at the Wall Street Journal. And as you said, management and leadership go hand in hand. They have to be linked, and they're obviously complementary. In your work, do you see the managers? Because you said the roles are obviously distinct. Do you see managers graduating to leaders, and do you ever see leaders falling back to managers?
It's a fantastic question. I think what happens is you're more likely to see managers graduate to leaders. Why? Because many times people are promoted because they were good at tasks. They were very good at efficiency, accuracy, consistency, safety, all those good things. We tend to promote people into management because they were good at tasks. What we find is that a lot of people get promoted to that management title with very little leadership development. And so what's interesting is all of a sudden they get, and I can tell you that it was for me, when I got my first supervisor title, it was like, because I was really good at being a front desk agent, I was very good at taking care of guests. So I got promoted. I remember on the second day, my general manager came to me and he says, I want you to remember one thing. The guest or customer is now no longer your number one priority. And that really staggered me, because it was like, well, wait up, that's what I'm really damn good at. What are you telling me that? He's like, no, now your number one priority is your people. And so, yes, what we see is that managers get put into these sort of roles. They get given these titles without being equipped to lead. Now, some people naturally have some of those inspirational skills. They have the passion, they have that effort, they're hard workers. So that doesn't say that they're not good leaders, but they don't realize that that's what is making them leaders. So what I often find is that they graduate into leadership over the years. Now, I'll caveat that by saying that some people do not graduate. It is amazing how many people are put into management positions who don't want to deal with people, and therefore they're not interested, and they just want to keep doing what they're doing. Now, the flip side was you sort of saying, do you find leaders regressing back into managers? Yes, because they get burnt out. Leadership requires effort. If you're not in the right place, right company, right job, doing the right thing, love what you do, leadership requires a vast amount of energy. And so what I often find is managers do get burnt out. Being a manager and focusing on reports and auditing and kind of more of the, the consistent day in, day out tasks is easier than being a leader who is emotionally available, respecting, recognizing, and going over the top. So unfortunately, when we see managers getting burnt out, the first thing to go is their leadership. They don't put the same energy into their people. And that's why I sort of say, hey, watch your passion. Don't lose the love of what you do, because it's such an important thing. When you start to lose that passion, what we started to see was that the regression of some of that energy that they bring to work every day is very noticeable by their employees. So yes, both things can happen, and it's important owners, organizations that are aware of that.
I've always taken pride in all the places I've worked in trying to get to know everybody I work with, right? Taking an interest in what they're all about. Okay, sometimes maybe you crawl into their lives, but to me, that's always very important. Does somebody have a childcare issue? Do they have to drop their daughter off at school every morning? So you can't really have an 8 o'clock meeting for somebody like that. Do they have dance recitals? Are they taking a master's class at night? Continuing education. Do they have an elderly parent they have to care for? I think that's so important because I've always experienced when you get to know the people you work with, they then get to know you, and it just helps the team function in a much higher level. The old Army football from the 1940s. You had Glenn Davis and Doc Blanchard, and I forget who was who, but one was considered Mr. Inside and one was considered Mr. Outside. But because of that, they became obviously a well-oiled machine because of that, and they all succeeded together. Now, I found interesting, you got 9 key moments. To me, it almost sounds like every day, because of those 9 moments, as you go home, it's almost like you're reevaluating really every day. Should I stay here? Am I happy?
Yeah, and as I said, whether it happens every day, what we know is that, as I sort of said, if someone's having a bad day, then it happens again and it happens again. So what tends to happen is it builds up where they'll start to really question themselves. So let's say the first time they come in, the first couple of days, first week, all right, that's just how things are. But then they'll start to kind of take a step back and go, well, wait up. Is it me? Is it the company? Is it my manager? Why am I not a good fit here? Why am I not being emotionally satisfied beyond maybe just doing this task than I should be? And so while it might not be every day, what we know is that over a period of time, it starts to build up and they do start to question it. And they often come back in the day, it comes back to their managers. If you look at those 9 moments, a lot of that was to do with whether or not the manager touched bases with them. And so what we sort of look at, and again, it's kind of a math game. If I was to say to every manager, you've got 15 minutes a day that every employee needs from you. As I indicated in my presentation, half of those moments can be done in a group. So in fact, I've taken that 12, 15 minutes and I've actually cut it down to about 8 minutes. But then some employees might need a little bit more time. Now you start to play a numbers game. The further you get up the organization, the more you focus on who is the next level. So for instance, an owner may have their executive team. They may have 6 of 8 people that needs to have that sort of emotional piece. For each one of the executives, then they focus on their direct managers. For managers, it might be supervisors all the way down. What you want to do is run a numbers game and make sure that there is someone at every level able to touch, again, a certain number of people. And based on our work that, you could have a supervisor manage about 18, 20 people. And that during the day, they can touch and kind of give emotional support and interactivity to them and still do their management job. So you start to kind of understand that it is a bit of a numbers. Where we start to get worried is when you start to have large numbers of employees, 100 employees, and there's one manager, or there's only one person. It's impossible for a manager to do that. And this is where we kind of go back and we sort of look at groups of employees and even managers, and we say, what is the ratio of direct managers to direct supports? And is it emotionally, or is it viable for them to give them the emotional lift that they need each and every day?
Well, that lift and that inspiration creates then the follower, right? Who is now following the leader, and that's what being a leader is all about. As you said, getting employees, inspiring their hearts and minds to getting them to do what you want them to do, right?
Yep, it's all about that want. They have to want it. Now, that doesn't mean some days you got to drag them kicking and screaming. Remember, I'm not talking about absolutes here, because again, at the end of the day, listen, some people have off days, but I always tell managers, culture is about, for the most part, most days, People feel good about what they do, who they do it for. And I think that's where I kind of sit. And I sort of said as I was presenting there that be careful about isolating. All of a sudden, one person has a bad day. Don't overreact and say, oh, my culture's broken. One person makes a mistake. Don't overreact and suddenly say, wow, we've got a bad culture. What you want to look at is, wow, I've got a majority of people now that are not enjoying, or we're underperforming. And people will often say, as business people, how do I tell if my culture is off? Look at your numbers. If you see performance down, efficiency down, if you see customer care down, all of those indicate a poor performing culture, because culture drives behavior, but behavior drives results. And so they often say, well, culture seems a bit soft, it's a bit fuzzy. I go, no, it's absolute. We used to be able to go into any part of an organization. We'd look at the numbers every day and we go, oh, performance was down. Numbers were behind yesterday. That's not an operational piece. It's a culture piece. Hey, what went wrong there yesterday? Oh, they got some bad news about one of their employees is really sick. And so everyone was feeling a little down yesterday. Guess what? Performance dropped. Now, what our job as a manager is to work out how to get it back up. We might have to do a little bit more in that space. You go into a group and you go, wow, numbers are very low compared to industry average. What's going on there? Bad manager. A key employee that was a favorite everybody was let go last month. They changed their pay and benefits. All of a sudden, the recognition. You can often go back by looking at the numbers, financial performance, customer satisfaction, all the key drivers that every company is driven in on, and go and look at and go, wait up, where are my numbers off? Where is my team performing less than expected, should be, or against industry average? It's a great way. I'm telling you now, it's culture problem. And remember that 70% of the time, it's going to be linked back to that manager.
Now, you said it was interesting. You talked about the reward system. You talked about the dollars and then the recognition. That while you didn't say it, I guess you're talking really about the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, right? And more times, the intrinsic is what really drives the people. It's not so much the, hey, I got my COLA plus an extra $1,000 as my raise. It's the other piece. It's the pat on the back. It's the thank you. It's the, your name is up, on the high performance list and at the senior management meeting, and your team is recognized as doing a good job.
Yeah, and remember, everyone's slightly different. So the reality is it's what's meaningful to them. That $1,000 will mean for some people be a big deal. For others, it'll mean no deal. What I think is important is that recognition is so individualistic. It's so personal that just rolling out one size fits all you're in danger of just kind of overly simplifying recognition.
Right.
So I think that's a critical piece that, again, think of it. $1 million is put into recognition every year, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. The goal of recognition is emotional lift, to make people feel good. Yet in many situations, we've gone in and seen that the recognition program actually doesn't make people better at all. In fact, in some cases, it can have the negative effect, which means people don't feel good because they realize that the people recognize, whereas because it was their turn, there was next person up. It actually didn't have anything. It wasn't connected to performance. It was just favorites of the manager, or it's just something that was done without any emotional intent or consideration of emotional intent. And therefore, it actually had a reverse effect where you actually demotivated by trying to do the right thing and still spending a bunch of money, but you actually had a negative effect.
I remember early on when I was first starting out, I remember going through one of those first performance appraisals, right? As a young professional, and getting all the glowing feedback. Oh, you're doing a great job. Everybody thinks you're wonderful. And then I just remember being newly employed, that at the end of the day, it's like, okay, that's great, but that translated to this is 1984. That translated to a $1,200 raise.
Yep.
that's about $20 a week. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all relative. I think that there's been enough research to show that once you feel you're competitively paid, which is the key moment, is am I being paid fairly and competitively, not am I being paid the most money? So the moment is this a fair wage and a competitive salary for what I do? As long as they answer yes, everything over and above that kind of washes a little bit. And a lot of the research will say it's like, pay isn't the number one motivator for performance. It has to be sufficed, or there's a sort of a bar that has to be kind of got over. But once you pass that bar, everything else becomes a bigger moment.
Now, this has been just a wonderful presentation. I mean, employee experience leading to customer experience is really what being an entrepreneur is all about. And while people always think, oh, they have all this great creativity, but as all of that comes together, and that's how you grow that vision and that idea, right?
Yeah.
From just a model to a successful platform. This was just phenomenal. I thank you so much. You were
Glenn, thank you.
You're an embodiment of everything what leading entrepreneurs of the world is all about. Thank you, Shane, for taking time. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. We wish you continued success in the future, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Okay.
Listen, I look forward to being back. Thank you, guys. And again, as I sort of said, at the end of the day, don't feel overwhelmed by a lot of what we've talked about. One step at a time, or one moment at a time. I really appreciate you guys getting me on, and all the best to you guys as well. Thank you.
Very important. Good to see you. Take care.
Yeah, take care. Cheers, Ben.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.